It feels like we're living in a time where the big picture on global progress is, well, it's pretty complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely complicated.
I mean, the UN set this really ambitious 2030 agenda, for a sustainable future,
Yeah.
massive global effort.
Right. A huge undertaking.
But then you look at the headlines and you have to ask, are we really on track to actually nail those sustainable development goals?
It often doesn't feel like it, does it?
Yeah, it often feels like we're pushing, really hard, but that finish line just keeps moving.
That feeling of complexity is spot on. It's easy to maybe point to specific wins here and there.
Sure.
But when you step back, look at the overall data, especially from big reports like the 2019 Global Sustainable Development Report,
Mm-hmm.
well, a much tougher picture emerges.
Exactly. And that's precisely why we're doing this deep dive today, focusing on that 2019 report. Because it wasn't just, another document dropped somewhere. It was pulled together by this group of independent scientists.
Right. Independent. That's key.
And they took a really, really hard look at where the world actually stood back then.
Yeah.
And honestly, given the trends they pointed out, it gives us a pretty powerful lens to understand where we are right now on this whole sustainability journey.
Absolutely. So our goal today really is to pull out the core insights from that major piece of research.
Okay.
We want to give you, the listener, a clear, kind of sharp understanding of the big hurdles and, maybe more importantly, the potential paths forward these scientists were highlighting.
Sort of cutting through the noise.
Exactly. Getting straight to the essential knowledge you need to navigate this whole complex landscape of sustainable development.
Okay, let's get into it. So the starting point seems to be this idea of interconnectedness. The report really hammers this home, right? How tightly woven the world is.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking goods zipping across continents, capital flowing everywhere, people moving, information spreading instantly. It's easy to kind of forget how much one country's development path is tied to what's happening, thousands of miles away.
That's such a fundamental point. I mean, these global flows, they've brought amazing progress, obviously. International trade, sharing knowledge.
Right, innovation.
Yeah, accelerating innovation.
Yeah.
But this same interconnectedness, it works like a global amplifier for problems too.
Ah, okay.
So challenges in one region, maybe an economic slump or an environmental crisis, they can just ripple out worldwide super fast.
Right, that makes sense. And then the report dives into these pretty major demographic shifts coming up, like huge population growth expected in sub-Saharan Africa by 2050.
Yeah, massive growth.
While other places, Europe, East Asia, they're actually dealing with aging populations. How do these different trends kind of shape the sustainability challenge?
Well, these demographic shifts, they really present what you might call a twin challenge.
Okay.
On one hand, rapid population growth, especially in poorer regions, can put immense pressure on resources, water, food, energy, and just basic infrastructure.
Right, roads, schools, hospitals.
Exactly. But then simultaneously, in regions with aging populations, you get different pressures, maybe economic ones like a shrinking workforce or higher demand for social welfare. But, and this is important, the report also points out that a growing population, if you invest in health and education,
Human capital.
precisely human capital, that can also be a really powerful engine for innovation and development. But it has to be managed sustainably, of course.
Okay, so it's not just a burden, it's also a potential opportunity, managed right.
Correct.
So when the scientists took stock back in 2019, how are we doing on the SDGs? There was some good news initially, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. Based on the trends then, the data did suggest we were kind of on track for certain targets.
Like what?
Things like reducing child mortality, getting more kids into primary school, those seemed within reach for quite a few countries based on the pace at that time.
So some positive momentum.
Yeah, definitely a sense of momentum in those specific areas, absolutely.
There's always a but, isn't there?
Hey, usually.
Then came this really sobering reality check. A study they highlighted found that no country, not one, was actually on track to hit all the SDGs by 2030.
That's right, 0 countries.
And, maybe even more surprising, no single goal had more than half the countries on track to meet it. That's a huge gap.
It really is. It forces you to confront the sheer scale of the transformation that's actually needed.
Yeah.
So while those pockets of progress were good, obviously the big picture showed this fundamental misalignment. Our current path just wasn't heading towards the holistic vision of the SDGs.
It wasn't just slow progress then, it was more fundamental.
Well, yeah, and what's fascinating or maybe alarming is that the report didn't just show insufficient progress. It also flagged these deeply concerning trends that were actually moving in the wrong direction, accelerating even.
Okay, like what were the big negative trends that really jumped out?
The report was pretty clear. Rising inequalities, so the gap between rich and poor getting wider,
Mm-hmm.
the intensifying impacts of climate change, which we see all around us, the really alarming, accelerating loss of biodiversity,
Yeah.
and just the sheer volume of waste, mountains of waste we're generating.
Right.
And here's where it gets, well, really concerning. The analysis suggested we might be getting close to critical tipping points in these systems.
Tipping points. Like what points of no return?
Potentially, where changes become sort of self-reinforcing and maybe irreversible, at least on human timescales.
Wow. That idea of irreversible change is, yeah, deeply unsettling.
Right.
So the scientists were basically saying, look, if we keep going like this, the very foundations, our social systems, our natural environment, they just won't be able to support a future where everyone can thrive.
That's the core message.
Which is the whole point of the SDGs in the first place.
Exactly. And that realization, it fueled this growing consensus, which the report really articulated powerfully. Sustainable development isn't just some nice-to-have aspirational goal.
It's essential.
It's the only pathway, really, to avoid potentially catastrophic outcomes, both environmentally and socially. And this is all amplified by climate change, plus these rapid shifts in tech consumption population.
Right. And the report, it does give credit where it's due, doesn't it? It highlights the 2030 Agenda itself and the Paris Agreement as these landmark achievements.
Oh, absolutely.
Like proof that maybe we can cooperate internationally on this scale.
Yeah, those were pivotal moments. They showed a global commitment, a recognition of the power of multilateralism, nations working together. They're tangible proof that global consensus and action are possible, even if difficult.
And it also makes that really important point that the SDGs, unlike the old Millennium Development Goals, they're for everyone.
Yes, that's crucial.
Countries, rich and poor.
It completely reframes the conversation, doesn't it? It's not about donors and recipients anymore. It's a shared responsibility. Every single nation has targets, has a role, a truly universal agenda.
Okay, so the report sets the stage. Progress is way too slow. The need for transformation is urgent. Then it really digs into specific areas of concern. Let's start with inequality that seems huge.
It is huge, and the report paints a pretty disturbing picture.
How so?
Well, rising income and wealth inequality, it's not just an ethical problem, right? It has really profound practical impacts on sustainable development.
Okay.
It often signals unequal access to the real basics: good nutrition, quality education, healthcare. A lack of a level playing field.
Which makes it harder for people to get ahead.
Exactly. It really hinders what economists call intergenerational mobility. Basically, it gets much harder for people to climb the ladder compared to their parents.
They even used the U.S. as an example, didn't they? Saying a lot of the inequality between parents just gets passed down.
Yeah, they pointed out that in the U.S., roughly half of the economic inequality between parents gets passed on to their children, which is quite high.
Wow.
And they contrasted that with places like Germany or Denmark, where that inherited inequality is much lower.
And the numbers they quoted are pretty staggering.
They really are. Like between 1980 and 2016, the richest 1% globally, they captured something like 27% of all the growth in wealth.
27% for the top 1%.
Yeah. And the bottom 50% of the world's population, they only got about 12% of that growth.
That's incredibly skewed.
It is. And that kind of extreme concentration of wealth and power, it can warp political systems, economic systems, undermine progress for everyone else.
And it's not just about money, is it? The report talks about multidimensional poverty. What does that mean exactly?
Right, good point. It's looking beyond just income. The Multidimensional Poverty Index, the 2018 one they referenced, it gives a broader view.
Okay.
It found about 1.3 billion people across 105 countries were experiencing multiple deprivations at the same time in health, education, living standards, things like that.
So lacking several basic things simultaneously.
Exactly. And what's really important is that progress in reducing this